what we find is not prophecy of doom. It is something far more interesting. A conception of time so complex, so layered, so mathematically rigorous, that it challenges our own assumptions about past and future. The Maya did not use a single calendar. They used multiple calendars running simultaneously, each serving different purposes, all of them interlocked through mathematical relationships. We have already mentioned the Tzolk'in and the Hab. The Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred calendar, governed ritual life. The Hab, the 365-day civil calendar, tracked the agricultural year. Together they formed the calendar round, a cycle of roughly 52 years. But the calendar round was not sufficient for Maya needs. 52 years is a human lifetime. For historical records, for astronomical calculations, for cosmological speculation, the Maya needed a system that could extend indefinitely. Enter the long count. The long count was the linear count of days from a fixed starting point. Unlike the cyclical Tzolk'in and Hab, the long count ran continuously, accumulating days without resetting. It was the backbone of Maya historical chronology. The starting point, known as the creation date, corresponds in our calendar to August 11th, 3114 BCE. This date marked the beginning of the current world age, the fourth creation in Maya mythology. 3 previous creations had existed and ended. The current creation would also end, at which point a new cycle would begin. The long count used a modified base 20 system with 5 positions, from smallest to largest. Kin, 1 day, Winal, 20 days, Tun, 360 days, Katun, 7,200 days, about 20 years, and Baktun, 144,000 days, about 394 years. A typical long count date was written as 5 numbers. 9.16.4.10.8, for example, meant 9 Baktuns, 16 Katuns, 4 Tuns, 10 Winals, and 8 Kin had elapsed since the creation date. The cycle that ended on December 21st, 2012 was the 13th Baktun. 13 Baktuns equal 1 Piktun in the extended count. When the long count reached 13.0.0.0.0, the Baktun counter reset, and a new great cycle began. This was not an ending. It was a rollover, like an odometer reaching 99,999 and flipping to 100,000. The world did not end when the Maya Baktun count reset. It simply started counting the next cycle. Maya inscriptions explicitly reference dates far beyond the current cycle. The Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque records events projected millions of years into the future. The Maya conceived of time extending indefinitely in both directions. The 2012 date was significant but not terminal. So where did the apocalypse idea come from? The answer is a mix of genuine Maya beliefs, colonial era distortions, and modern projection. The Maya did believe in world ages. The Popol Vuh, the Quiché Maya creation narrative recorded after the Spanish conquest, describes 3 failed creations before the current one. The first humans were made of mud and dissolved. The second were made of wood and were destroyed by a great flood. The third were transformed into monkeys. Only the fourth creation, made from maize dough, succeeded. This cyclical view of creation and destruction echoed across Mesoamerica. The Aztecs had a similar concept of 5 suns or world ages. Each age ended in catastrophe. The current age would also end eventually. But end does not mean annihilation. In Maya thought, the end of an age was also the beginning of a new one. Death and rebirth, destruction and creation. The cycle continues. Colonial era interpreters, primarily Spanish friars, filtered Maya beliefs through Christian apocalypticism. The Book of Revelation cast a long shadow. European culture was steeped in end times thinking. When the friars recorded Maya beliefs, they emphasized elements that fit their own framework. Cyclic renewal became linear apocalypse. Modern interpreters added another layer. New Age authors, starting in the 1970s and 80s, seized on the 2012 date as evidence of Maya prophecy. José Argüelles, author of The Mayan Factor, linked the long count to galactic alignments and spiritual transformation. Terence McKenna's time wave zero theory, though not originally connected to the Maya, was eventually synchronized with the 2012 date. The result was a cultural phenomenon that had little to do with actual Maya beliefs. The ancient Maya would not have recognized the apocalyptic scenarios promoted in their name. What did the Maya actually think about the end of the Bactun cycle? The honest answer is that we do not fully know. The Spanish destroyed most Maya books. The surviving sources, primarily the Popol Vuh and the books of Chilam Balam, were recorded after the conquest and show clear colonial influence. We cannot be certain how much they preserve authentic pre-Columbian belief. What we can say is that the Maya treated calendrical transitions as significant. The end of a Katuan, roughly every 20 years, was marked with monuments and rituals. The end of a Baktun, roughly every 400 years, was even more important. These transitions were times of cosmic renewal, moments when the world was symbolically recreated. The 2012 date, the end of the 13th Baktun, was undoubtedly significant in Maya thought. 13 was a sacred number. The 13th Baktun was the last in the current cycle before the Pictun counter would increment. This was a major transition. But transition is not apocalypse. The Maya expected the world to continue. They expected the next cycle to begin. They expected time to keep counting. The calendar itself makes this clear. The long count has higher orders beyond the Baktun. The Pictun, the Kalabtun, the Kinchiltun, the Alautun. These units extend the count to periods of millions and billions of years. Why create such units if you expected time to end? The Maya were not predicting doom. They were building a calendar capable of tracking deep time, a calendar that could count forever. This raises a question. Why did the Maya need such a calendar? What purpose did it serve? Part of the answer is astronomical. Maya astronomy tracked cycles of Venus, Mars, and the Moon that spanned centuries. The long count provided a framework for recording and predicting these cycles. Without a continuous day count, astronomers could not correlate observations separated by hundreds of years. Part of the answer is historical. Maya kings claimed legitimacy through ancestry and precedent. Inscriptions traced royal lineages back generations. The long count allowed precise dating of historical events, connecting current rulers to ancient predecessors. History became a tool of political power. Part of the answer is religious. Maya cosmology was deeply concerned with time. The gods created and destroyed worlds according to cyclic patterns. Rituals had to be performed on correct dates. The calendar was not just a record-keeping device. It was a sacred technology, aligning human action with cosmic rhythm. But there may be more. The precision of Maya timekeeping, the extension of the count into millions of years, suggest concerns that go beyond immediate practical needs. The Maya were thinking about time in ways that anticipate modern cosmology. Consider the creation date. August 11th, 3114 BCE. This date is not arbitrary. It was calculated by working backwards from observed astronomical cycles. The Maya understood that time extended before the current world age. They set their 0 point at a moment of cosmic significance, not historical convenience. Consider the extended counts. The Alautun, the largest known Maya time unit, spans roughly 63 million years. This is deep time by any standard. The Maya were conceptualizing durations that dwarf human history, that approach geological and even cosmological scales. Why? What were they tracking? What did they expect to find in cycles lasting millions of years? Conventional archaeology does not fully answer this question. The practical uses of the calendar are clear. The deep time extensions seem excessive. Why count to 63 million years if you only need a few centuries? One possibility is astronomical. There may be long period cycles that the Maya observed or calculated. The precession of the equinoxes, for example, takes roughly 26,000 years. The alignment of planets might create cycles spanning millennia. If the Maya were tracking such phenomena, they would need a calendar capable of recording them. Another possibility is mythological. Maya creation stories describe multiple world ages. If each age lasted millions of years, the calendar would need to count that far. The extended units may relate to cosmological concepts that we do not fully understand. A third possibility is that the Maya valued precision for its own sake. Perhaps they extended their calendar not because they needed to track long periods, but because they could. The mathematical elegance of a complete vigesimal system, capable of counting any number of days, may have been its own reward. Or perhaps there is something we are missing. Something that the destroyed codices would have explained. Something that the Spanish fires consumed forever. The calendar remains, the books are gone. We have fragments of a system that was once complete. We can see the mathematics, the astronomical correlations, the ritual applications, but the meaning, the purpose, the world view that gave rise to it, that we can only partially reconstruct. The Maya counted time. They counted it with extraordinary precision across extraordinary spans. They believed that time was cyclical, that worlds ended and began, that the present was one phase of an eternal rhythm. December 21st, 2012 was a significant date in that rhythm. Not an apocalypse, not an ending, a transition. A moment when one great cycle closed and another opened. The Maya would not have panicked. They would have celebrated. They would have performed rituals to ensure a favourable transition. They would have looked forward to the new age, whatever it might bring. The calendar counts forever. Time does not stop. The cycles continue. We are now more than a decade into the new Baktun. The world continues. The stars still turn. The Maya calendar still runs, even if few people mark its passages. What the Maya knew about time, we're only beginning to appreciate. Their calendar was more than a tool. It was a philosophy. It was a cosmology. It was a way of understanding humanity's place in an eternal cyclical cosmos. The books are burned. The cities are ruins. The jungle has reclaimed its own. But the calendar survives, carved in stone, painted on pottery, encoded in the movements of planets. The Maya gave us something precious, a different way of thinking about time, not the linear arrow of Western progress, always moving forward, always leaving the past behind, but a spiral, returning to familiar points at higher levels, cycling through creation and destruction forever. In the next chapter, we examine what the Maya did with their time, the rituals that mark their days, the blood that sanctified their monuments, the connection between sky and sacrifice, blood and sky. The calendar was not abstract, it demanded action, and those actions were written in stone and flesh. Chapter 6. Blood and Sky. The priest stands atop the pyramid. Below him, the city spreads toward the jungle edge. Thousands have gathered in the plaza, their faces turned upward, waiting. The sun climbs toward its zenith. Venus hangs in the morning sky, bright and unwavering. The timing is precise. Astronomers have calculated this moment for months, perhaps years. The calendar has been consulted. The auguries have been read. Everything aligns. Today is the day. The captive is brought forward. He is a noble, taken in a flower war designed specifically to capture rather than kill. His body is painted blue, the colour of sacrifice, the colour of water and sky and the realm between worlds. He does not struggle. He knows his role. In Maya cosmology, sacrifice is not murder. It is transformation. It is passage. It is the feeding of the gods who sustain creation. The obsidian blade catches the light. What happens next is swift and brutal by modern standards. The chest is opened. The heart is removed while still beating. It is offered to the sky, to the sun, to the forces that keep the cosmos in motion. Blood flows down the pyramid steps. Blood, the most precious substance in Maya thought. Blood, the food of the gods. Blood, the currency that pays for continued existence. This is the Maya civilization that popular culture often ignores. Not the peaceful astronomers, not the wise calendar makers. The Maya who believed that the universe required blood to continue. The Maya who built their greatest monuments as stages for ritual killing. The Maya who understood the cosmos as a hungry machine that would consume itself without constant feeding. The connection between astronomy and sacrifice was not coincidental. It was essential. The Maya did not study the stars out of curiosity. They studied them to know when the gods needed to be fed. The calendar was not a neutral record of passing days. It was a schedule of obligations. Certain days demanded blood. Certain alignments required death. Venus was particularly important. The Maya tracked Venus with obsessive precision, and that precision had deadly purpose. The heliacal rising of Venus, its first appearance as the morning star after a period of invisibility, was considered a moment of cosmic danger. The planet was associated with warfare and destruction. Its emergence required blood to be appeased. The Dresden Codex, that precious surviving manuscript, contains tables that predict Venus appearances centuries in advance. These were not academic exercises. They were practical guides for military and ritual planners. Wars were timed to Venus events. Sacrifices were scheduled to planetary alignments. The heavens dictated the calendar of death. This integration of astronomy and violence disturbs modern sensibilities. We want to admire Maya intellectual achievements without confronting how those achievements were used. We want the calendar without the blood. But they cannot be separated. The Maya understood them as one system. To grasp this, we need to understand Maya cosmology at a deeper level. The Maya did not see the universe as a stable, self-sustaining system. They saw it as fragile, constantly threatening to collapse into chaos. The gods had created the current world, but creation was not a one-time event. It was an ongoing process that required continuous input. That input was blood. Blood carried Chulel, the sole force that animated all living things. When blood was shed in sacrifice, Chulel was released and transferred to the supernatural realm. The gods received nourishment. The cosmic machinery continued to turn. The sun rose, the rain fell, the maize grew. Without sacrifice, the system would fail. The sun would stop, the rains would cease. The world would end as previous worlds had ended. Sacrifice was not optional, it was the price of existence. This belief was not unique to the Maya. Similar ideas appear throughout Mesoamerica. The Aztecs, who came later, are famous for their massive human sacrifices, but the Maya preceded them and shared the fundamental logic. Blood feeds the gods sustain the world. Gods, therefore blood must flow. The scale of Maya sacrifice is debated. Early scholars, influenced by Spanish colonial accounts, may have exaggerated. Recent archaeology suggests that mass sacrifice was less common among the Maya than among the Aztecs. But it definitely occurred. The evidence is undeniable. Cenotes, the natural sinkholes that provided water in the limestone landscape of Yucatan, were particularly important sacrificial sites. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza has yielded hundreds of human remains, along with jade, gold, and other offerings. Victims were thrown into the water as gifts to Chak, the rain god. The cenote was a portal to the underworld, and the sacrifices were messengers sent to the gods. Skeletal analysis reveals who was sacrificed. Children appear frequently, young adults, captives taken in war, occasionally members of the elite. The victims were not random. They were chosen according to criteria we only partially understand. Youth may have been valued for its purity. Captive warriors carried the prestige of defeated enemies. Elite victims demonstrated ultimate devotion. The methods varied. Heart extraction was the most dramatic, but not the only form. Decapitation was common, especially for ballgame losers, drowning in cenotes, burning, arrow sacrifice, in which the victim was tied to a frame and shot by multiple archers. Each method had symbolic meaning. Each was appropriate for particular contexts. Bloodletting, a milder form of sacrifice, was practiced by the elite themselves. Kings and queens pierced their tongues, earlobes, and genitals with obsidian blades and stingray spines. The blood was collected on paper and burned, sending the essence to the gods. Visions induced by blood loss and pain were interpreted as divine communication. The famous lintels of Yaxchilan depict Lady Cabal Suk, a royal woman, pulling a thorn-studded rope through her tongue. Blood drips onto paper in a bowl at her feet. From the blood and smoke rises a vision serpent, a conduit to the supernatural. Her husband, the king-shield jaguar, stands ready with a torch. This was not torture, it was devotion. It was the responsibility of rulers to feed the gods with their own blood. The ball game, that mysterious Mesoamerican sport played with a rubber ball in eye-shaped courts, was intimately connected to sacrifice. The game had multiple meanings. It reenacted mythological events. It resolved disputes between cities. It provided entertainment. But it also provided victims. Losing teams, or perhaps winning teams in some versions, faced sacrifice. The bull court was a threshold between worlds, and the game was a ritual drama whose ending was written in blood. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza, the largest in Mesoamerica, features carved panels showing decapitation. Players and spectators knew what was at stake. The integration of sport, religion, and death seems bizarre to modern observers. We separate these categories carefully. Games are entertainment. Religion is spiritual. Death is medical. The Maya collapsed these distinctions. The game was the religion. The religion was death. Death was entertainment. All of it was cosmic maintenance. The pyramids themselves were stages for sacrifice. Their height placed the rituals closer to the sky, closer to the gods. The steep stairs forced victims to climb toward their deaths. a physical enactment of the journey from earth to heaven. The blood that flowed down the steps sanctified the stone, charging it with sacred power. Temple summits were visible from across the city. The entire population could witness the moment of sacrifice, even if they could not see the details. The spectacle was public and communal. Everyone participated. Everyone shared responsibility for feeding the gods. This was not sadism. The Maya were not gratuitously cruel. They believed they were doing what was necessary. They believed the alternative was cosmic collapse. In their worldview, the priest wielding the obsidian blade was not a murderer. He was a maintainer. He was keeping the universe alive. Modern observers struggle with this. We want to admire the Maya. We want to celebrate their achievements. We do not want to think about the blood. But the blood was inseparable from the achievements. The same astronomical knowledge that impresses us was used to schedule killings. The same mathematical sophistication that we praise calculated the most auspicious days for death. This is not a condemnation, it is an attempt at understanding. Every civilization has aspects that later generations find abhorrent. The Greeks kept slaves. The Romans staged gladiatorial games. Medieval Europeans burned heretics. The Maya sacrificed humans. These practices made sense within their cultural frameworks, even as they horrify us today. The question is whether we can appreciate Maya achievements while acknowledging Maya practices. The answer must be yes. We can admire the astronomy without endorsing the sacrifice. We can study the calendar without celebrating the blood. We can recognize genius while not excusing violence. But we should not pretend the violence did not exist. Sanitizing the Maya does them no favors. It reduces them to a fantasy, a New Age projection of peaceful wisdom that never existed. The real Maya were complex. They were brilliant and brutal. They were human. The blood and the sky were one system. The Maya looked up and saw gods that needed feeding. They looked down and saw victims that could provide that feeding. The connection was logical, given their premises. The premises were different from ours, but the logic was sound. We may never fully understand why the Maya believed what they believed. The origins of Mesoamerican sacrifice are lost in prehistory. By the time we have records, the practice is already ancient and established. The Maya inherited it, elaborated it, and continued it for centuries. When the Spanish arrived, they were horrified by what they found. The conquistadors had their own forms of violence, including the Inquisition, but they could not comprehend sacrifice as religion. They destroyed what they could. They burned the books. They toppled the idols. They imposed Christianity at sword point. The sacrifices ended. The cenotes stopped receiving their offerings. The pyramids fell silent. The old gods were forgotten, or driven underground, or merged with Catholic saints in the syncretic religions that survive today. But the memory lingers. The cenotes still hold their secrets. The carvings still show the blood. The understanding of what the Maya believed and practiced is part of understanding who they were. The sky demanded blood. The Maya provided it. For centuries the system worked. The sun rose, the rain fell, the maize grew, the cities flourished. Then something changed. The cities were abandoned. The jungle returned. The sacrifices, whatever their cosmic purpose, did not prevent us to collapse. In the next chapter, we examine that collapse. The mystery of the 9th century, the emptying of the lowlands, the end of classic Maya civilization. What happened? Why did the system fail? And was it really a collapse at all? The collapse that never was. Chapter 7. The collapse that never was. The last long count date inscribed at the great city of Tikal corresponds to August 16th, 869 CE. After that date, silence. No more monuments. No more records of kings and conquests. No more dates carved in stone. Across the Maya lowlands, the same pattern repeats. City after city falls silent during the 9th century. Palenque, Copan, Calakmul, Karakol. The great centres that had flourished for 500 years stop building, stop carving, stop recording. Within a few generations they are empty. Within a few centuries they are ruins swallowed by jungle. This is the Maya collapse. One of the great mysteries of archaeology. A civilization that rivaled any on Earth seemingly vanished within a century. Millions of people disappeared from the historical record. Cities that had stood for half a millennium were abandoned to the forest. What happened? Where did everyone go? And why? For decades, the collapse has fascinated researchers and the public alike. Theories abound, drought, warfare, environmental degradation, disease, social revolution. Each theory has evidence. None is fully satisfying. The collapse remains one of archaeology's great unsolved puzzles. But here is a secret that popular accounts often miss. The Maya did not collapse. Not really. Not in the way the word implies. The lowland cities were abandoned. That is true. The classic period political system disintegrated. That is also true. But the Maya people did not vanish. They did not die out. They did not forget who they were. They simply changed. Today, there are approximately 7 million Maya living in Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras. They speak 30 different Maya languages. They maintain traditions that stretch back millennia. They are the descendants of the people who built Tikal and Palenque and Chichen Itza. The Maya civilization did not collapse. It transformed. This distinction matters. When we speak of collapse, we imagine catastrophe, mass death, complete disappearance. The historical reality is more nuanced. The political system failed, the cities emptied, but the people survived. They moved, they adapted, they continued. Understanding this reframes the mystery. We are not asking why the Maya died. We are asking why they left their cities. We are asking why a particular form of civilization ended. We are asking what drove millions of people to abandon centuries of urban life and disperse into the countryside and highlands. Let us examine the evidence. The abandonment of the lowland cities was not simultaneous. It was a rolling collapse that unfolded over roughly a century. Different cities fell at different times, some in the early 9th century, some in the late 9th century. A few, like Chichen Itza, continued into the 10th century before succumbing. The sequence suggests contagion. Not literal disease necessarily, but cascading failure. When one city fell, its neighbours lost trade partners, military allies, economic connections. Their own systems became stressed. They fell too, and their fall stressed still more neighbours. Collapse bred collapse. But what triggered the initial failures? What pushed the first dominoes? The leading candidate is drought. Paleoclimate studies based on sediment cores, stalagmites, and other proxies reveal that the 9th century was one of the driest periods in Maya history. Multiple severe droughts occurred, some lasting years. In a region dependent on rainfall for agriculture and drinking water, extended drought would have been catastrophic. The Maya lowlands lack rivers and lakes. Water comes from rain stored in reservoirs and natural sinkholes. City like Tikal had an elaborate water management system with plastered plazas designed to channel runoff into storage tanks. But the system had limits. A drought lasting more than 1 or 2 years would exhaust reserves. A drought lasting a decade would be existential. The evidence for drought is strong, but drought alone may not explain everything. The Maya had survived droughts before. The pre-classic period saw dry spells without urban collapse. Why was the 9th century different? One answer is population. By the late classic period, the Maya lowlands were densely populated. The LiDAR survey suggests 10 million or more people living in the region. This was far more than the pre-classic period. The system was running closer to capacity. There was less margin for error. Another answer is environmental degradation. Centuries of intensive agriculture had depleted soils. Deforestation for construction, fuel and lime plaster production had altered local climate. Erosion was widespread. The Maya had transformed their landscape, but the transformation had costs. The environment that supported the cities was exhausted. A third answer is political fragmentation. The classic Maya world was divided among dozens of competing kingdoms. Wars were constant. The inscriptions celebrate victories, captured enemies, ritual sacrifices. This endemic warfare may have prevented the coordinated response that drought and environmental stress required. Instead of cooperating, the cities competed. Instead of sharing resources, they fought over them. The combination was deadly. Drought stressed the system. Environmental degradation reduced resilience. Warfare prevented cooperation. The cities which had concentrated population and political power became liabilities rather than assets. The people left. But where did they go? The archaeological record provides clues. Population did not simply vanish. It dispersed. Some moved to the coasts where fishing and trade provided alternatives to rain-fed agriculture. Some moved to the highlands of Guatemala, where altitude and different rainfall patterns offered refuge. Some moved to the northern Yucatan, where cities like Chichen Itza and later Mayapan continued to flourish. The pattern suggests rational decision-making. People assessed their circumstances and chose new locations. They did not die passively. They acted. They survived. This reframing changes the story. The collapse was not a failure of the Maya. It was an adaptation. The classic period urban system stopped working, so the Maya stopped using it. They developed new forms of organization, new settlement patterns, new ways of life. The cities were abandoned because cities no longer made sense. The political system that had concentrated power in divine kings broke down. The religious ideology that had sustained pyramid building and monument carving lost credibility. The people walked away from a system that no longer served them. Some researchers see this as a form of social revolution. The commoners who had built the pyramids and fed the armies and bled on the altars finally rejected the system that exploited them. They stopped supporting the kings. They stopped providing labor tribute. They stopped believing in the divine right of rulers to command their lives. This interpretation is speculative. We have no inscriptions from commoners. The voices that come down to us are royal, elite, official. But the silence of the commoners is itself evidence. They stopped building monuments. They stopped carving inscriptions. They stopped maintaining the infrastructure of classic Maya civilization. Their rejection was written in absence. The collapse, then, was not collapse. It was revolution. It was adaptation. It was the end of one system and the beginning of another. The Maya who emerged from the transformation were different from their classic period ancestors. They were less centralized, less hierarchical, less monumental. But they were still Maya. They still spoke Maya languages. They still practiced Maya religions, adapted and evolved. They still farmed maize and built communities and raised families. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they found Maya kingdoms still functioning. The cities were different, smaller, less impressive than the abandoned ruins in the jungle, but they were real. They had armies and markets and political structures. The Maya had not disappeared. They had changed. The Spanish would impose their own catastrophe. Disease would kill millions. Conquest would destroy political autonomy. Colonial rule would suppress language and religion. The Maya would suffer terribly, but they would survive, as they had survived the 9th century collapse. Today's Maya are the heirs of this resilience. 7 million people, 30 languages, a continuous cultural tradition stretching back 3,000 years or more. The civilization that supposedly collapsed is still here. This perspective should inform how we think about the ancient Maya. They were not a failed experiment. They were not a cautionary tale of overreach and collapse. They were a successful civilization that lasted for millennia, adapted to changing circumstances, and persists today. The abandoned cities are not gravestones. They are relics of one phase of a longer story. The phase ended. The story continued. But the mystery of the 9th century remains compelling. Even if collapse is the wrong word, something dramatic happened. Cities that had functioned for 500 years stopped functioning. A political system that had organized millions of people disintegrated. The change was rapid and thorough. Understanding why matters, not just for Maya history, but for our own time. We live in a world of environmental stress, political fragmentation, and overpopulation. The Maya faced similar pressures. Their response offers lessons. They adapted. They moved. They let go of systems that no longer worked. They did not die fighting to preserve the old order. They built something new. Whether this was wisdom or desperation, we cannot know. Perhaps they had no choice. Perhaps the collapse was more painful than the archaeological record suggests. Perhaps the transition involved suffering we can only imagine. But the outcome is clear. The Maya survived. They are still here. The collapse that never was. The transformation that succeeded. The people who refused to disappear. In the next chapter, we return to the technology that revealed the full scale of Maya achievement. LiDAR, lasers from the sky, piercing the jungle canopy, uncovering cities invisible for 1,000 years. What LiDAR revealed changed everything we thought we knew. The discovery is ongoing. The jungle is still giving up its secrets. Let us see what lies beneath the trees. Chapter 8. What LiDAR revealed. Imagine you could strip away the jungle, not with machetes and months of labor, not with bulldozers and environmental destruction, but with light itself. Laser pulses fired from an aircraft, millions of them per second, passing through gaps in the canopy, bouncing off the forest floor, returning to sensors that record their journey with millimeter precision. This is LiDAR, light detection and ranging, and it has revolutionized Maya archaeology. The technology is not new. LiDAR has been used for decades in surveying, mapping, and industrial applications. What is new is its application to archaeology, particularly in tropical forests where traditional survey methods are slow, expensive, and physically dangerous. The Maya lowlands are among the most challenging environments on Earth for archaeological fieldwork. The jungle is dense, visibility on the ground is measured in meters. Terrain that appears flat from satellite imagery is actually corrugated with ancient structures hidden under vegetation. A researcher can walk within feet of a pyramid and not see it. Traditional archaeology in this environment proceeds by brute force. Teams cut transects through the forest, recording what they find. They clear vegetation from promising mounds and excavate. Progress is measured in seasons, in years, in careers. A lifetime of work might map a single city centre, leaving the surrounding territory unexplored. LiDAR changed the equation. A single overflight can survey hundreds of square miles. The laser pulses pass through leaves and branches, finding their way to the ground. When millions of returns are combined, the forest floor emerges in stunning detail. Structures invisible from the air become visible in the data. The landscape reveals its secrets. The first major Maya LiDAR surveys came in the early 2000s. Pilot projects at sites like Caracol in Belize demonstrated the technology's potential. Archaeologists who had spent decades mapping Caracol on foot suddenly saw their work extended in weeks. Structures they had missed appeared in the data. The city was far larger than anyone had realized, but the 2018 Pacunum survey in Guatemala was something else entirely. This was not a pilot project. This was a systematic survey of over 800 square miles of the Petén, the heartland of classic Maya civilization. The results were staggering. 60,000 previously unknown structures. 60,000. Pyramids, platforms, houses, walls, roads, reservoirs, agricultural terraces, an entire civilization hidden under the canopy. The numbers forced a radical revision of Maya demographics. Previous estimates had suggested 1 to 2 million people living in the Maya lowlands at the Classic period peak. The new data suggested 10 million or more. This was not a scattered collection of city-states. This was a continuous, interconnected urban landscape comparable to the densest populations of the ancient world. The infrastructure was equally impressive. Raised causeways connected major centres, some stretching for miles through swampy terrain. These sac biob, or white roads, were engineering achievements in their own right. They required planning, labour, and maintenance. They implied political coordination across large areas. Defensive fortifications appeared throughout the survey area. Walls, ditches, and berms protected urban cores. Some complexes showed evidence of sophisticated military architecture, with killing zones and overlapping fields of fire. The Maya were not only builders, they were warriors, and their warfare was more organised than previously thought. Agricultural features covered the landscape. Terraces climbed hillsides, preventing erosion and expanding arable land. Drained fields appeared in low-lying areas, converting swamps to productive farmland. Irrigation channels directed water where it was needed. The Maya had transformed their environment on an industrial scale. Perhaps most striking was the evidence of continuous occupation. The survey area was not a collection of isolated cities separated by empty forest. It was a filled landscape. Everywhere the LiDAR looked, it found structures, small platforms that may have been houses, agricultural features that may have been fields. The entire region had been occupied, worked, modified. This finding upended decades of assumptions. The jungle between Maya cities was not wilderness. It was suburbs, farmland, managed forest. The urban cores were just the most visible manifestation of a civilization that covered the landscape. The implications for Maya society are profound. A population of 10 million requires organization. It requires food production at scale. It requires water management, waste management, conflict management. The Maya were operating systems of extraordinary complexity, and they did it without the advantages that Old World civilizations enjoyed. No metal tools, no draft animals, no wheeled transport. Every stone moved by human muscle, every field cleared by human labor, every road built one basket of fill at a time. The LiDAR data does not explain how the Maya achieved what they achieved. It simply documents that they achieved it. The explanation remains a matter of interpretation. The surveys have continued since 2018. New areas have been scanned, new discoveries have emerged. The Maya landscape is revealing itself piece by piece, and each piece adds to our understanding. In 2020, researchers announced the discovery of a massive platform at the site of Aguada Phoenix in Mexico. The structure is nearly a mile long and over 30 feet tall. It dates to around 1000 BCE, making it one of the oldest Maya monuments known. It predates the preclassic fluorescence at El Mirador by centuries. Aguada Phoenix was identified through LiDAR and confirmed by ground survey. Without the aerial technology, it might have remained hidden for generations. The site is in flat, unassuming terrain. There are no dramatic pyramids, no obvious mounds, just a subtle elevation change, invisible from the ground, clear in the LiDAR data. The discovery suggests that Maya monumentality began earlier than previously thought. The civilization did not emerge gradually from simple villages. It burst onto the scene with large-scale construction, coordinated labor, and organized society. The foundations of classic Maya civilization were laid more than 3,000 years ago. Other discoveries have followed. In 2021, researchers identified a previously unknown city in the Petén, near the Mexican border. The site, provisionally called La Corona, shows evidence of a major urban center with pyramids, plazas, and residential compounds. It was invisible from the ground, visible from the air. The pace of discovery is accelerating. As LiDAR coverage expands, as data processing improves, as machine learning algorithms help identify features, the hidden Maya world is coming into focus. We are in the early stages of a revolution in Maya archaeology. But LiDAR has limitations. It shows what is there. It does not explain what things mean. It cannot read inscriptions or date structures or determine who lived where. It provides a map, not a history. The map requires interpretation. A platform in the LiDAR data might be a house or a temple or a warehouse or something else entirely. Archaeologists must still go to the ground, still excavate, still analyze artifacts and architecture. LiDAR accelerates discovery. It does not replace the hard work of understanding. There are also ethical questions. LiDAR surveys generate detailed maps of archaeological sites. Those maps could guide looters as easily as researchers. The locations of unexcavated structures are valuable information. In a region plagued by looting, the release of LiDAR data requires careful consideration. The relationship between foreign researchers and local communities is complex. The Maya heritage belongs to the Maya people. LiDAR. Surveys conducted by international teams must navigate questions of access, permission, and benefit sharing. Who owns the data? Who decides what is published? Who profits from the discoveries? These questions have no easy answers, but they must be asked. The technology that reveals the past also raises questions about the present. How we use LiDAR data reflects our values and priorities. What is clear is that the Maya world was far larger, far more complex, and far more impressive than previous generations realized. The LiDAR revolution has rewritten the textbooks. It has challenged assumptions. It has opened new questions even as it answered old ones. The jungle is finally giving up its secrets. After 1,000 years of silence, the cities are speaking again. Not in words, but in shapes. Not in inscriptions, but in infrastructure. The patterns of platforms and plazas, roads and reservoirs, houses and fortifications tell a story of ambition, achievement, and adaptation. We are only beginning to read that story. The surveys continue. The discoveries multiply. Each year brings new data, new interpretations, new mysteries. The Maya landscape was not empty. It was full of people, full of buildings, full of effort and organization. What we see in the ruins was never the whole picture. The whole picture was hidden under the trees. Now we can see it, and what we see changes everything. The lasers have spoken. The canopy has parted. The cities of the Maya stand revealed. In the next chapter, we return to the question that has haunted this entire investigation, the ancient astronaut debate. The claims of outside influence, extraterrestrial contact, knowledge that should not exist. We have examined the evidence. We have considered the arguments. Now we must render a verdict. Were the Maya visited by beings from beyond Earth? Did they receive knowledge from an advanced civilization, human or otherwise? or is their achievement fully explicable in human terms? The ancient astronaut debate. Let us engage it directly. Chapter 9. The ancient astronaut debate. Let us be direct. The ancient astronaut hypothesis, as applied to the Maya, makes specific claims. It argues that Maya achievements, particularly their astronomical knowledge, cannot be explained by conventional means. It suggests that the Maya received assistance from extraterrestrial beings. It interprets certain Maya artifacts and images as evidence of advanced technology. These claims deserve serious examination, not mockery, not dismissal. Examination. If the evidence supports them, we should follow where it leads. If the evidence does not support them, we should say so clearly. Either way, the Maya deserve honest analysis, not ideological warfare. So let us examine the claims one by one. Claim 1. Maya astronomical knowledge is too precise to have been developed through naked eye observation alone. The evidence offered includes the Venus tables in the Dresden Codex, which track the synodic period of Venus with an error of less than 2 hours over 584 days. It includes the calculation of the solar year as 365.2420 days, accurate to within 30 seconds per year. It includes eclipse prediction, planetary tracking, and the integration of multiple cycles over centuries. This precision is genuinely impressive. But is it impossible without outside help? The answer is no. Naked eye astronomy, practiced systematically over centuries, can achieve remarkable precision. The Maya were not guessing, they were measuring, they were recording, they were calculating. Consider how they might have done it. A priest stands at a fixed observation point. He watches the horizon. Each morning he notes where the sun rises. Each evening he notes where it sets. He marks the position against stone pillars or natural features. He records the date in the long count, day after day, year after year, generation after generation. Over time, patterns emerge. The sun rises at its northernmost point on one day each year. This is the summer solstice. It rises at its southernmost point on another day. This is the winter solstice. The days in between can be counted. The length of the year becomes clear. The same method applies to Venus. Watch where it rises, watch where it sets. Record the dates. Note when it disappears behind the sun. Note when it reappears. Count the days between events. Over decades of observation, the synodic period becomes clear. The precision improves with time. If one generation gets a value of 585 days, the next generation refines it to 584. Errors accumulate and become visible. Corrections are made. The tables are updated. This is not magic. It is science. It is the same method that Babylonian astronomers used to predict eclipses. It is the same method that medieval Arab astronomers used to refine Greek data. Patient, observation, careful recording, mathematical analysis. The Maya had centuries to do this work. They had cultural institutions dedicated to astronomical observation. They had a writing system capable of recording complex calculations. They had the long count calendar to correlate observations separated by generations. Given these resources, the precision of Maya astronomy is remarkable, but not inexplicable. It is the product of sustained intellectual effort, not extraterrestrial intervention. Claim 2. Maya mythology describes beings from the sky who brought knowledge and civilization. This is true. Maya creation myths, particularly the Popol Vuh, describe gods who created humanity and taught the arts of civilization. These gods are sometimes associated with celestial phenomena. They come from above. They possess knowledge that humans lack. But this pattern is universal. Every culture has origin myths. Every culture attributes its foundations to supernatural beings. The Greeks had Prometheus bringing fire. The Egyptians had Thoth bringing writing. The Sumerians had the Anunnaki establishing kingship. The Chinese had the sage emperors teaching agriculture and medicine. These myths encode cultural values and explain cultural origins. They are not literal history. They are narrative frameworks for understanding human existence. To interpret Maya myths as evidence of extraterrestrial contact requires assuming that Maya myths are different from all other myths, that they alone record actual events, that the Maya, unlike every other culture, were visited by real beings from space. This is special pleading. It applies one standard to the Maya and another standard to everyone else. There is no methodological justification for this. The gods in Maya mythology behave like gods in mythology everywhere. They are powerful. They are sometimes benevolent, sometimes cruel, They create and destroy, they demand sacrifice. They are not described as beings from another planet. They are not said to travel in spacecraft. The astronomical associations reflect the Maya understanding of the cosmos, in which the sky is the realm of the divine. Reading alien visitation into these myths requires reading in, not reading out. It requires importing modern concepts that the Maya themselves would not have recognized. Claim 3. Maya iconography depicts advanced technology, particularly spacecraft. The primary exhibit is the sarcophagus lid of Pakal, which we examined in detail in Chapter 4. We concluded that the conventional interpretation, depicting Pakal's descent into the underworld, is well supported by evidence. The astronaut interpretation requires ignoring Maya symbolism and projecting modern expectations onto ancient art. Are there other examples? Ancient astronaut proponents point to various Maya images that allegedly show astronauts, rockets, or advanced machines. Let us consider some. The Mayan helicopter at Abydos is sometimes cited, but Abydos is in Egypt, not Mesoamerica, and the so-called helicopter is a palimpsest, overlapping inscriptions that create coincidental shapes. It has nothing to do with the Maya. Some point to figurines and carvings that allegedly show beings in spacesuits or helmets. Upon examination, these typically show priests in ritual regalia, warriors in battle dress, or supernatural beings in traditional costume. The Maya had elaborate ceremonial clothing. Headdresses, masks, and body adornment were complex and visually striking. To modern eyes, unfamiliar with Maya costume, these can look strange. But strangeness is not evidence of extraterrestrial origin. The Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque, beyond Pakal's tomb, contains no depictions that cannot be explained by Maya religion and politics. The other great Maya sites, Tikal, Calakmul, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, contain no images that require technological interpretation. The iconographic evidence for ancient astronauts is weak. It depends on selective interpretation, unfamiliarity with Maya art, and a willingness to see what one expects to see. Claim 4. The Maya could not have built their cities without advanced technology. This claim misunderstands what the Maya actually did. Maya construction used available materials, primarily limestone, worked with stone tools. Limestone is relatively soft when freshly quarried, and hardens with exposure to air. It can be cut, shaped, and carved with obsidian, chert, and other stone implements. The Maya did not need metal tools. They had something better for their purposes. Obsidian, volcanic glass, holds an edge sharper than surgical steel. It is abundant in highland Guatemala, and trade networks brought it to the lowlands. Obsidian blades could cut stone, carve wood, and perform surgery. Maya construction techniques are well understood. Buildings were made of rubble cores faced with cut stone. Corbelled arches, though limited compared to true arches, allowed the spanning of interior spaces. Lime plaster provided waterproofing and decorative surfaces. None of this required technology beyond what the Maya possessed. The labour required was immense, but the Maya had labour. Populations in the millions could mobilise tens of thousands of workers for royal construction projects. The pyramids were not built in a day. They were built over years, even decades, by organised teams working under royal direction. Comparisons to Egyptian pyramids are instructive. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built with bronze tools, copper saws, and wooden sledges. The Egyptians had no wheel, no draft animals in the sense of oxen or horses, no cranes. Yet they built the largest stone structure of the ancient world. Human organisation and persistence can achieve extraordinary things. The Maya achievement is no more mysterious than the Egyptian achievement. Both cultures mobilized massive labor forces over long periods to build monuments that expressed political and religious power. Both did it with the technology available to them. Claim 5. The Maya disappeared mysteriously, suggesting external factors. We addressed this in Chapter 7. The Maya did not disappear. They transformed. The classic period urban system collapsed, but the Maya people survived. 7 million Maya live today. The civilization continues. The causes of the 9th century transformation are debated, but not mysterious. Drought, environmental degradation, warfare, and political fragmentation combined to undermine the urban system. People adapted by dispersing, moving, and developing new forms of organization. There is nothing in the collapse that requires extraterrestrial explanation. It follows patterns seen in other civilizations that have faced environmental and political stress. The Roman Empire collapsed. The Harappan civilization collapsed. The Akkadian Empire collapsed. None of these collapses are attributed to aliens. Having examined the specific claims, what can we conclude? The ancient astronaut hypothesis, as applied to the Maya, fails on the evidence. Maya achievements are impressive but explicable. Maya mythology follows universal patterns. Maya iconography depicts Maya culture, not alien technology. Maya construction used available materials and massive labor. Maya transformation reflects environmental and political factors. This does not mean the Maya were not remarkable. They were. Their achievements in astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and art are genuinely extraordinary. They developed a sophisticated civilization in a challenging environment without the technological advantages of old world cultures. But their achievements were human achievements. They did not require outside help. Attributing them to extraterrestrials diminishes rather than enhances Maya accomplishment. It says, in effect, that indigenous Americans could not have done this on their own. That is not only wrong, it is insulting. The ancient astronaut hypothesis often carries this undertone. It attributes the achievements of non-European civilizations to outside intervention, while accepting European achievements as indigenous. The pyramids of Egypt require aliens. The pyramids of Mexico require aliens. But the cathedrals of Europe do not. The bias is clear. Rejecting the ancient astronaut hypothesis does not mean rejecting mystery. The Maya remain mysterious in many ways. We do not fully understand their origins. We do not fully understand their collapse. We do not fully understand their religion, their politics, their daily life. The questions are genuine. But genuine questions deserve genuine investigation. They deserve archaeological excavation, epigraphic analysis, scientific testing. They do not deserve speculation dressed as revelation. They do not deserve claims unsupported by evidence. The Maya deserve to be understood on their own terms, as a human civilization, as an indigenous achievement, as a living culture that persists today. The ancient astronaut debate is, in the end, a distraction. It focuses attention on fantasy when reality is far more interesting. The real Maya, the ones we are discovering through LiDAR and excavation and linguistic analysis, are more fascinating than any alien visitation could be. They built cities in the jungle. They tracked the stars across millennia. They created art of stunning beauty. They developed mathematics that surpassed their European contemporaries. They survived conquest, disease, and colonization. They are still here. Asking whether they needed alien help misses the point entirely. The Maya did this. Humans did this. That is the wonder. That is the mystery worth contemplating. In our final chapter, we turn to the living Maya, the people who carry this heritage forward. What do they know that we do not? What have they preserved across the centuries? What can they teach us about their ancestors and ourselves? What the Maya still know. Chapter 10. What the Maya still know. In the highlands of Guatemala, in villages scattered across the mountains, the Tzolk'in calendar still turns. Daykeepers, traditional spiritual specialists, track the 260-day cycle that their ancestors created thousands of years ago. They know which days are auspicious for planting, for marriage, for travel. They perform ceremonies on the sacred dates. They maintain a continuous tradition that predates the Spanish conquest by millennia. The Maya are not a vanished people. They are not a mystery to be solved by outsiders. They are 7 million people living their lives, speaking their languages, practicing their traditions. What they know about their ancestors is not speculation. It is inherited memory, passed down through generations, preserved in ritual and story and everyday practice. This living tradition is often overlooked in discussions of ancient Maya civilization. Researchers focus on ruins and inscriptions, on archaeology and epigraphy. These are valuable sources, but they are not the only sources. The Maya themselves have knowledge that the stones cannot provide. Consider the Tzolk'in. When Spanish missionaries arrived, they tried to suppress Maya religion. They burned books. They destroyed idols. They imposed Christianity, but they could not stop the day count. The Tzolk'in continued, passed from generation to generation in oral tradition, maintained by daykeepers who risked punishment to preserve it. Today, ethnographers have documented the Tzolk'in as practiced in highland Guatemala. The day names vary slightly from community to community, but the structure is consistent with ancient inscriptions. The calendar that modern Maya use is the same calendar that appears in classic period monuments. The count has not been broken. This continuity is remarkable. 500 years of colonization, political upheaval, and cultural suppression did not destroy the tradition. The Maya preserved their calendar because it mattered to them. It was not an abstract intellectual exercise. It was a living practice, woven into the fabric of daily life. What can the living Maya tell us about their ancestors? They can tell us about worldview. The Maya understanding of time, space, and the cosmos persists in traditional communities. Time is not linear, it is cyclical, events recur. The past informs the future. This perspective, which we glimpse in ancient inscriptions, is still alive in Maya thought. They can tell us about agriculture. Traditional Maya farming practices, particularly the milpa system of rotating maize cultivation, have been maintained for centuries. Modern research confirms that these practices are ecologically sophisticated, maintaining soil fertility and biodiversity in ways that industrial agriculture does not. The Maya knew their environment intimately. That knowledge survives. They can tell us about medicine. Traditional Maya healers use plants and rituals that have pre-Columbian roots. Some of these practices have proven pharmacologically effective. Modern researchers have documented Maya herbal remedies that contain genuine therapeutic compounds. The ancestors understood their environment, and that understanding was not purely spiritual. They can tell us about craft. Maya weavers still produce textiles using techniques that date back centuries. The patterns encode meaning. The colours carry symbolism. The act of weaving is not just production. It is cultural transmission. Each textile is a document of Maya identity. They can tell us about resistance. The Maya survived conquest. They survived colonization. They survived civil war and genocide. The resilience of Maya culture is not an accident. It is the product of deliberate effort, of communities that chose to maintain their identity despite overwhelming pressure to abandon it. This resistance continues. In Chiapas, Mexico, the Zapatista movement draws on Maya identity and tradition. In Guatemala, Maya activists fight for language rights and cultural recognition. Across the Maya world, communities organize to protect ancestral lands, preserve traditional knowledge, and assert their place in modern nations. The Maya are not a museum exhibit. They are a living people with a living culture facing contemporary challenges. Understanding the ancient Maya means understanding this continuity. The pyramid builders are not gone. Their descendants are here. But the relationship between ancient and modern Maya is complex. 5 centuries of colonization have left deep marks. Languages have merged with Spanish. Religions have blended with Catholicism. Political structures have been transformed by state power. The Maya of today are not identical to the Maya of the classic period. This does not make them less authentic. Culture is not a fossil. It evolves, adapts, changes. The Maya of today are as Maya as their ancestors, even though their lives are different. Identity is not frozen in time, it is lived in the present. Some traditions have been lost. The hieroglyphic script was not preserved. The Maya of today cannot read the inscriptions their ancestors carved. When epigraphers deciphered the script in the 20th century, they were recovering knowledge that had been lost to the Maya themselves. This loss is painful. It is a consequence of conquest, of book burning, of cultural suppression. The knowledge that Spanish friars destroyed can never be fully recovered. We have fragments, we have inference, we have the stones, but the libraries are gone. Yet the Maya response to this loss has been remarkable. As decipherment progressed, Maya communities engaged with the results. Schools began teaching hieroglyphic reading. Artists incorporated ancient imagery into contemporary work. Activists used the recovered history to strengthen claims to land and rights. The relationship between archaeologists and Maya communities is evolving. For decades, outsiders studied the Maya as objects. The Maya were not consulted about interpretations. Their perspectives were not considered relevant. The ancient and modern Maya were treated as separate categories. This is changing. Collaborative archaeology involves Maya communities in research design and interpretation. Maya scholars contribute to academic debates. Indigenous perspectives are recognized as valuable, not just politically, but intellectually. The Maya themselves are rediscovering their heritage. Young people learn hieroglyphics that their grandparents never knew. Communities reclaim sites that colonizers had declared abandoned. The past becomes a resource for the present, not a burden, but a foundation. What do the Maya still know? They know who they are. Despite centuries of pressure to assimilate, to disappear, to become something else, the Maya have maintained their identity. This persistence is itself knowledge. It is the knowledge of how to survive, how to adapt, how to preserve what matters while accepting what must change. They know their land. The Maya relationship with the environment is intimate and detailed. Traditional ecological knowledge, accumulated over millennia, informs agriculture, medicine, and resource management. This knowledge is increasingly recognized as valuable as industrial approaches prove unsustainable. They know their stories. Maya oral tradition preserves narratives that illuminate the ancient past. The Popol Vuh, recorded after the conquest, clearly draws on older sources. Other stories, less famous but equally precious, circulate in communities where elders pass them to the young. These stories are not just entertainment, they are philosophy, history, and survival strategy. They know their obligations. Maya cosmology emphasizes reciprocity. Humans owe debts to the gods, to the ancestors, to the earth. These debts must be paid through ritual, through respect, through proper living. This ethical framework has sustained Maya communities through immense hardship, and they know their future. Maya activists and intellectuals are articulating visions for Maya communities in the 21st century. They are not seeking to recreate the classic period. They are seeking to carry Maya identity forward, adapted to modern realities grounded in traditional values. The Maya civilization that began 3,000 years ago continues. It has changed. It will keep changing. But the thread remains unbroken. The people who built El Mirador and Tikal and Chichen Itza have descendants who remember them, who honor them, who carry them forward. This is the final lesson of Maya civilization. It is not dead. It is not a cautionary tale. It is not a mystery to be solved by outsiders. It is a living tradition, maintained by living people looking toward a living future. The jungle still holds secrets. LiDAR will reveal more cities. Archaeologists will excavate more tombs. Epigraphers will read more inscriptions. Each discovery will add to our understanding of the ancient Maya. But the Maya themselves are the greatest source. 7 million people, 30 languages, traditions that stretch back millennia. The ancestors built cities that rivaled any on Earth. The descendants maintain an identity that colonization could not destroy.